Hey, Travis, my good friend. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and um, to our multiple fans who got on live at 11:30 last week to watch us, and there was dead air. It's all Ross's fault. We go live about, I don't know, once in a blue moon, and we went live. We were talking. We
Yep.
actually had a pretty good show, but
It was great. It was a great show.
had a nice conversation, let's say, but
Yeah.
no one else heard.
Oh,
We alone were privy to the resolutions, the answers we had to all of life's riddles, and the world will just have to go a little bit longer without hearing them.
the spectacular elucidations that we had.
Yes, all tucked away and the second to the last day of 2025.
Is that information lost in the universe, Travis? It's emanating from the earth at the speed of light.
As an ether,
That's right.
and through sheer osmosis, it will reach the hearts and minds of our beloved fans and no one else.
That's right.
The
Oh.
millions or dozens or couple of people that listen to this show.
So this is Travis and Ross, and this is Notes On, and it's 2026, and we try to do Christ on purpose.
Yes.
And
but before we get into our little theological spiel, how was your New Year's Eve? How did you bring in the new year?
well, I love to go to the parade, but it rained on the parade this year, so it was no fun. So my wife and I just stayed up with a adult beverage and watched the clock turn, and that was it. It wasn't terribly exciting, but it was with my wife, and I'm deeply grateful to have someone, specifically my wife, to ring in the new year with. So it was perfectly wonderful.
Well, happy
How
New
about
Year to
you?
you, my friend.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah. So
What'd
yeah,
you do?
I was in Chattanooga
Uh huh.
celebrating with a friend and my dear friend Drew from high school.
Wow.
And, so yeah, we saw in the new year together. So it was nice, very nice.
Is Chattanooga in the Eastern time zone or is it in the
Yeah,
Central?
it's in the Eastern time zone, and
Okay.
it's right on the cusp. Like Nashville's 2 hours away, and once you're in Nashville, you're definitely in the Central time zone.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was nice, and then on Saturday I woke up and met my son in Chattanooga and my brother-in-law, and we had breakfast, and then I came down here and started work today. So
Fantastic. All right.
So I'm in religion 2 now, and first order of business, we will look at Islam.
Ooh.
My goal is to read the Quran in 1 month.
Wow.
So it's a new goal. I have several goals. Let's see if I fulfill any of them.
Seems like Quran's in a lot of trouble. If you listen to Jay Smith and those guys who are Christian apologists,
Oh yeah,
Jay Smith is saying that there's a very good chance that Muhammad didn't even exist as the person that Islam claims for him to be.
I do not believe that thesis. But what's funny is David Wood, and his name escapes him. But David Wood had a sort of a mock debate with a Muhammad mythicist, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And basically it was 2 hours of them just trashing Islam, because David Wood was like, look how insane this person is. No one would invent this. And of course, his debate opponent, who was a fellow Christian, was saying, no, he couldn't have existed. So either way, Islam doesn't look good, right?
No.
If he didn't exist, then Islam is false. But if he did exist, he existed because it's just one long argument based on the principle of embarrassment. This guy's a moron. He is a sexual deviant. He's a false prophet by any standard. And So yeah, he just shouldn't be taken seriously as a human being, let alone a prophet. So that was David Wood's point, and I concur with it. I don't care who knows. So, but with my students, I don't have an agenda. My first and foremost agenda is to tell them what the Quran says. We're going through the study Quran, and so they will get to know what these verses mean from Muslim scholars. That's the goal.
Good. So, well, we could spend our time talking about that, but we have there's an article I sent you the other day that really fascinated me. We're going to try to put it up in the show notes if you look for it. It's on a website called the Times of Israel, and it's written by a gentleman named Menachem Creditor, and he's talking about to be earthly angels. And it's a beautifully written article, and there's a lot of stuff we can talk about in there, but what fascinated me, Travis, was the passage from Genesis 48, I think 13.
It's 15 through 16.
Yeah. And he talks about how traditionally one of the interpretations of that passage in Judaism is that it can be taken as God being some kind of multiplicity rather than a unity.
That's right. So here's what the text says.
Yeah, let's read the passage.
This is Genesis 48, verses 15 and 16. The God before whom my ancestors Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has shepherded me from the beginning of my life until today, the Malach who has redeemed me from all misfortune, may that one bless these children.
Now, what is it about that passage that gives anyone the impression that they're not just talking about, the author is not just talking about the same God in all three sections of that verse?
Well, what jumps out is the sort of the threefold refrain. So there's a kind of parallelism going on here where it's talking about God, the God before whom my ancestors and Abraham and Isaac walked. And then there's the God who shepherded me from the beginning of my life. And then the Malach who's redeemed me. Malach being a word for angel or angelic being. And so we have this threefold refrain suggesting that there's either God is serving many functions, but there's some interpreters, as he points out in the article, who want to say more than that. So that's the initial gist of the article. And if anybody who's hearing this kind of knows where we're going, this threefold reference may very well be a kind of hidden allusion to a God who is both one and many at the same time.
Yeah. So you read that book a couple of years ago. What's the name of it? It was
it's called The Two Powers of Heaven by Alan Siegel. I didn't even know about this book, and I should have, but because it was written in the 70s. But the person who sort of repopularized it was Heiser, Michael Heiser, in his book The Unseen Realm. And for those, if you've never heard of this before, get Heiser's book The Unseen Realm. He has a chapter in there where he sort of summarizes Siegel's argument. And then if you want more research or more ammunition, Siegel's book is the place to go. And what Siegel points out is that in the century before Christ came, and then the first few centuries after Christ came, there was a dispute between the rabbis themselves on how to read the text. The Orthodox view promoted an absolute monotheism, wherein there's just one God, one person who is God, and then that's all there is to it. Period. End of story. That's it. But then there was the two powers of heaven idea, which says that there is at least two, and some would even suggest more than two persons who are adequately or rightly called Jehovah.
Yeah.
That they are equal to one another. And there's a real distinction there. And my own reconstruction of this, and I can't say that Siegel would argue this way, and I'm not going to say that Heiser argued this way, but this is sort of my own take as we speak. And that is, when the exile was over, and a scholar by the name of William Deaver, who's not a Orthodox Christian at all, he doesn't believe that the Jews were originally monotheistic. So let me back up.
Okay.
So you have a three-way debate going on in academia. The critical scholars of our day, this is sort of mainstream academic stuff, are going to argue that the Old Testament is originally a polytheistic text. That the original Hebrews did not worship one God. Or if they were called to worship one God, they would worship one God, and they recognized, however, multiple deities who are on the same metaphysical level as Jehovah. Okay, so this is either a rank polytheism, where they're worshiping many gods within their culture, or at the very least, it's a henotheism, where you're called to worship one God while recognizing others.
Mm-hmm.
And the modern day Mormonism is really a form of henotheism, and the modern Mormon is actually moving in the direction of a kind of panentheism, where there's a kind of dual mutual relationship between the all of what we call God and the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the standard view, and you can see this in Mark Smith and others, is that, and William Deaver, is that by the time we hit the 6th century, the exile was such a formative experience for the Jews that they evolved from this kind of henotheism to a pure monotheism. And for those, I know conservative Christians get nervous about all this, and it's not that I blame you, but Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, was not one book originally. According to critical scholarship, there are 2 Isaiahs, maybe 3, and some even go so far as to say 4. But first Isaiah was written in the 8th century BC. So that's somewhere between 740 and around 680 BC. This is when the prophet, historical Isaiah, existed. He prophesied, and then his book was collected as a single scroll, and so on and so forth. And then another individual who we don't know about, but wrote in kind of the stream of Isaiah's thought. This guy lived and flourished during the 6th century BC during the exile. And it was during the exile, from chapters 40 on, that you see the second person emphasizing that there's only one God that exists. And so a pure monotheism is developed in the 6th century BC, mainly through the influence of this second Isaiah. Okay, now Dan McClellan, who comes from a Mormon background, he is a very famous Bible scholar. Now, he's probably the most famous Bible scholar on YouTube, probably with the exception of Bart Ehrman.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I'm not sure. Dan McClellan won't even grant that common thesis that you find among academics. That he actually represents an even more radical wing that says that monotheism as such was not developed until the 2nd century AD, so that even the New Testament is a polytheistic document. And now he's not the only one that I've heard say this sort of thing. Robert Price seems to agree with that, and others. Now, that, as far as I can tell, is a minority view in the academy today. Okay, so that's that wing of scholarship. Those of us who either agree with the mainstream view that the Jews were pure monotheists by the time we hit the 6th century BC, or more traditionalists like myself who thinks that Jehovah revealed himself to Abraham as the only God, we are split. There are traditional Christians, and then there are traditional Jews. So a good person to look at as a refutation of this academic, this modern academic view is Rabbi Tovia Singer. He too is reticent, obviously, to suggest that the original monotheism began in the 6th century BC. He's going to push it back. Traditionalists will minimally push it back to Moses, but most of us are going to go all the way back to Abraham.
Right.
For obvious reasons. We believe that God himself revealed himself to Abraham and to the patriarchs as one and only one God. Okay. Now, among those of us who think that monotheism exists in the beginning, there are the everyday Jew, the Jewish rabbis, the Orthodox view, which says that God only and ever intended for him to be revealed as one person, and that doctrine was taught by the patriarchs, Moses, the prophets, and so forth. And what the Jews are doing, the Orthodox Jews, is they're preserving this original monotheistic view that was intended to be taught by the patriarchs and the prophets. Christians have traditionally seen curious texts all throughout the Old Testament. Right. And we see it as a foreshadowing of what was clearly revealed in the Christ event, which is the Trinity. Okay. And I'm going to back up because I've talked a lot, but I just thought you might want to hear that background.
Yeah, that's excellent. And so Alan Siegel is claiming that there was a minority, but substantial minority of scholars as early as about 100 years before Christ saying there's something more to this strictly monotheistic way of looking at things. Now, my question to you about that is, do you think that could have been the Holy Spirit kind of rustling the spirit of Jews to sort of set them up for when Christ came?
Oh, yeah, I do think that this is preparatory work on the part of the Holy Spirit. And because I believe it was a triune God who revealed himself in the Old Testament scriptures.
Sure.
And that raises questions, obviously, but I think that they were capturing something that was originally intended, but it took an historic event like the coming of Christ, plus a New Testament revelation for them to be able to put this together more clearly.
And so Alan Siegel's, can you elaborate a little more on what he says about that? I know that part of the reason it was rejected by Judaism is because it sounded very Christian. So,
well, in this, when we say in the 1st century before Christ, it could have been as late as, say, 20 BC. So, okay. 1st century before Christ is somewhere between 100 to 20 years before Christ was born. And this two powers doctrine existed alongside even Jesus coming, and then goes into the century. And so many were like, well, that's just a Christian heresy. So the Christians were flagged. Gnostics seem to have seen something like this, but then there were other rabbis in the mix talking like this.
Okay.
Now, I see this as an illumination on what's going on when Jesus says what he says in Mark 14. And if I may go, I'm going to go there to Mark 14 because it's a really interesting text. And, Jesus is standing before his accusers, and at one point in his trial, and I'm looking at Mark 14:61, it says he kept silent and did not offer any answer. Remember, everybody's accusing Jesus of all kinds of things, and their witness is not agreeing with one another. And again, the high priest was questioning him and said to him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Now, this is really interesting on the one hand, because he doesn't mention God's name. This is a euphemism in Judaism, so they don't want to mention the sacred name. So are you the Christ, that is, are you the Messiah of Israel, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus says, and I'm reading again, verse 62, and Jesus said, I am, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. And tearing their clothes, the high priest, tearing his clothes rather, he rends his garment. The high priest said, what further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. How does it seem to you? And they all condemned him as deserving of death.
Wow.
Okay. Now, a lot to unpack there. He says, are you the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus says, I am. So, are you the Christ? I am. Are you the Son of the Blessed? I am. Okay. So he's claiming to be both the Messiah and the Son of God. And then he says, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power of God. Now that word power should take on significance because it is an allusion to the two powers doctrine.
Yeah.
Now this, as Darrell Bock says, is a theological train wreck. All right. We have two readings of the Old Testament. One says there's only one God in the sense that there's only one person who is Jehovah. Another says there's one who stands as his equal. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power of God. And it says, he also says, coming in the clouds, sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Now, anyone who knows anything about the Bible knows that Jesus is alluding to Daniel chapter 7, starting in verse 13 and going through verse 14. Jesus is saying, Daniel says, I looked in the night visions and I see one like a son of man, and he comes to the Ancient of Days and he receives a kingdom and all will worship him.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you either have to believe that there's a second person who is in one sense not equal to the Ancient of Days because he receives the power from the Ancient of Days, and yet is in another sense equal to him because he receives the same worship that the Ancient of Days receives. And you get this not only in Daniel, but in Revelation. The Lamb is going to receive the same worship as the Father. So either you're saying that, or you're going to have an explanation that mitigates the force of what you're reading. But notice this. When they say you are blaspheming God, Jesus, there is kind of a double blasphemy that he's committed. On one level, Jesus is saying, I agree with those who say there are two powers in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the background to all this. They are aware of this doctrine. They are appalled by it. They are offended by it. And they are not happy with rabbis who say this sort of thing. It's a vocal minority. It's an extreme minority, though. This also explains why the disciples are confused, because they don't know, they may not even know the subtleties of this debate going on among the rabbis.
Right.
But Jesus does. But not only are you claiming that there are two powers in heaven, Jesus, you're claiming to be one of those powers.
So it goes from the abstract to the real.
Yeah, you are claiming to be that. And he says, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? I am. Absolutely, yes. Now, Michael Bird debated Bart Ehrman a few years back. And Ehrman is saying he was just claiming to be the Messiah. And Brant Petrie stood up and asked this question. Very good question. Brant Petrie continues to impress me as a scholar. And he says, what's blasphemous to a Jew about claiming to be the Messiah? Whoever is the Messiah is going to have to claim to be the Messiah.
Yeah.
So if it's blasphemy to claim to be the Messiah, you just shot yourself in the foot. You can't be Jewish and believe that it's blasphemous to claim to be the Messiah. That's an impossibility, unless you want to say that it's the idea of a Messiah is not true.
Right.
So what was he saying that's blasphemy? It can't be that he was claiming to be the Messiah.
It must
He
have
said,
been.
"Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "Well, I'm the Christ, but I ain't the Son of the Blessed." Then they would have all said, "Oh, okay. All right. Now that we have that settled, let's make you a king."
Yeah.
But no, he claimed to be the Son of the Blessed, one who sits at the right hand of the power and comes in the clouds of heaven. That is an amazing claim. It is a claim to deity.
Another thing I see in there, Travis, is that I never saw before is that the idea of the Son of the Blessed is already there. So when Jesus claims to be the Son of God, that's not a totally new concept. Like, what's that? They already had a category for it.
Right. They have a category for it, but for them, the best spin on it is to accept a kind of adoptionism, where God adopts you as his son. So, like, think Psalm 2, kiss the Son, find refuge in him. I'm mixing Psalms, but this is a coronation hymn. And the historicists, the academics of our day, they're going to read that as in a straight historical manner, where it's just a coronation hymn of a king being anointed, and he's called the Son by adoption. But as you and I know, the Psalms are prophecies. So I'm not an historicist. I'm a Christian. And I believe that I'm a classical Christian. I believe that these Psalms are prophecies that are foretelling the coming of the great Messiah.
Yeah.
And so Jesus is not saying, well, he's adopted. I'm a son in the sense that I'm a righteous man. And the same way I said in my Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the righteous, for they shall be called sons of God. That's not how Jesus is using the word son here, because he's saying, you will see the Son of Man. I am that Son of Man. And you're going to see him coming in the power. He's going to be sitting at the right hand of the power and coming in the clouds of heaven. I'm not just a righteous man who's called a son of God by adoption.
Right. And then when he says I am, he's also identifying with the God of Abraham.
That seems to be a subtle allusion to the I am sayings all throughout Isaiah 40 through 46, as well as, of course, the famous Exodus 3 incident.
Wow. Travis, we've only got a minute left, and so maybe we're going to have to pick this up next week, because we want to tie all this into the Genesis 48 passage in this article.
Right.
But let's encourage everybody to read this article, and we'll get it posted in the show notes, because this is just a continuation of that argument. So,
but I do want to, since we're coming near the end here, he gives, what's interesting about the article, he talks about the Ramban, and the Ramban or the Ramban is Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, or Nachmanides. And he says, Nachmanides suggests that God in the first line, God in the second line, and the Malach in the third are not three different beings at all. They are one. The Malach is not a separate creature acting at a distance. The Malach is a manifestation of God, God made accessible, God made near, God appearing in a form that can meet a human life. And then Nachmanides points to a thread in Torah where God's presence shows up in an angel who speaks as God, carries God's identity, even bears his name. It is as if the Torah is telling us the infinite is infinite, but the infinite is not trapped in infinity. The one can appear as many without ceasing to be one.
The one can appear as many without ceasing to be the one. That is like one molecule away from Trinitarianism.
That's right.
I love it. And this is a 21st century article by a Jew who has no idea, I guess, that you and I are going to grab a hold of this and
summarizing
finish line,
yes, summarizing the exegesis of a medieval rabbi.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
All right. Well, God bless you, sir.
Great stuff. Can't wait till next week. Thanks, buddy. All right, Travis. Bye.